Hi, and welcome to the SaVeg podcast. I'm Rose, and I'm a content creator going by the handle Cheap Lazy Vegan, and I also own a vegan cafe by the same name as the podcast, which is SaVeg Cafe.
And I'm Daniel, also a vegan and one of your favorite guest stars on Cheap Lazy Vegan's YouTube channel.
We're two friends currently living in different countries, and we'll be giving our savage take on all things life, veganism, and the latest trending topics.
So basically, whatever comes to our minds, because we love to talk.
You are currently listening to the previous episode of this podcast, but if you would like to listen to this week's episode and get some exclusive content, go over to patreon.com/thesavagepodcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the SaVeg Podcast.
Hello, everybody.
Today, similar to actually recent episodes, we're kind of diving deeper into some of the kind of issues that have been going on. Well, it's been going on for a while, but it's just like, I think right now it's really at the forefront of the media. And I think everything that happened, we spoke about George Floyd in a couple episodes ago. And then actually Rose recommended to me a documentary on Netflix, which I watched called, it's the 13th, right?
Yeah. It's called 13th. It's
13th.
also on YouTube.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to listen to this podcast and you just want to go and watch that movie, you can do that. But listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
But if you take anything out of this, I think that everyone should watch this documentary. And basically, if you guys have no idea, if you're living under a rock at this moment and you have no idea what's happening right now, there's riots all over the world, really, but mainly in the US. There's riots, there's protests all over the world. With regards to racism, systemic racism, and all of this stemmed from the George Floyd incident, which we talked about like 2 episodes ago.
Yeah.
And well, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because as we mentioned too, like there's been, and we'll talk about this in this podcast as well, but there's been so many things that have gone on for so long. And you're right. Like that, I feel like that George Floyd incident, especially like, I feel like also right now, because we're in quarantine as well, everyone is a bit more kind of like riled up. And then something like that, just like, it just set, which is, I think, in obviously it's horrible what happened, but I think in a way it's kind of really, really kick-started a movement that has been going on for a while, but kind of given it a extra momentum, if you will.
Absolutely.
So I think that's been really, really good. And you know, this particular documentary, how did you find out about it?
Okay, so basically, again, like you said, it's not good what happened, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was good that it was caught on camera, and it was good that it got national or international attention, because this kind of stuff happens behind the scenes all the time. And because this was caught on camera, it was now kind of shown to everybody what goes on, because, you know, it put a face to something that goes on, you know, maybe on a daily basis, or it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
And the reason why I found out about this documentary, which basically kind of goes through the history of racist policies.
Yeah. And
we're going to talk about this documentary in like full detail in this episode.
Yeah.
But it goes through the history of the racist policies that have happened since the beginning of like time, since like slavery, basically the beginning of the United States, and how all of those things trickled. And whoa, what was that?
Oh, sorry. There's a door blowing in the window.
Oh, goddamn. Okay. So the history of racism and all of that stuff. And the reason why I found out about it is because a lot of people were talking about, you know, educating ourselves and everyone about all of this. And this was one of the first and most recommended movies to watch to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, I couldn't agree more, because I think it's hard to talk about racism. It's hard to talk about, you know, what we can do now without understanding the context, like the historical context.
And where it's come from. I think you're right. It was a very powerful documentary to watch, because it really does break it down and go through kind of since, you know, even past the civil rights movement and earlier on from like slavery and everything else, how that has shaped, you know, the U.S. judicial system as it stands today, and why there is this kind of criminalization of Black people within that. And I think it's really, really interesting. And some of the, like, one of the things that really like was crazy, I just want to like say like one of the lead stats that really like hit me, that I was just like,
oh God.
It starts from the beginning. I think it's a good way to kind of set off the tone of the podcast in a sense, where they said basically the US, so this is something that really, like, when I heard this, I was like, oh my God. So the US makes up, I think it was 5% of the global population. And
Right.
yet within the US, those that are incarcerated in the US make up 25% of the global incarcerated population.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
insane. It's insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And out of those, out of those incarcerated people, this is another statistics that's insane. So black men account for 6.5% of the US population. 6.5%. Pretty small, percentage. They make up 40.2% of the prison population of the United States. So don't tell me that there is no systemic racism involved.
Exactly.
They're not all criminals. That's the thing. Oh God, there's so much to talk about. But
There is.
the fact of the matter is, okay, let me just get a few things out of the way because I feel like there are people, and I was actually thinking, I was one of them before I understood, many years ago, before I understood what actually systemic racism meant.
Yeah.
Because I thought systemic racism meant that there were specific policies that said, for example, black people can't vote or women can't do this. But that's not actually the meaning of systemic racism. It's not necessarily that it has to be so obviously written in the laws.
Exactly.
But it's like everything that kind of maybe happened beforehand that led to the consistent discriminatory policies that consistently keep putting, for example, black people in jail for minor crimes.
Exactly. Well,
that's just one example.
Exactly. And I think a big point of that as well is when they're passing laws or bills or whatever in the US, that you're right. It doesn't say in black and white to say, you need to discriminate against certain individuals, but they put into policy certain laws that by the context of those laws, it is in effect discriminating against those, minority groups such as black people, Hispanics, and everything else. And I think one of the good examples that they used in the documentary was the whole concept of the drug war that was going on. And they were saying about, crack or heroin or crack cocaine versus regular cocaine, the powdered cocaine. And they were saying, the powdered cocaine is looked at as more of a kind of elite drug that, like the business class or whatever people are using versus the stuff that's on the streets.
It was a suburban drug.
Yes,
and
that's
then
right.
the crack cocaine was the cheap urban drug. And I actually wrote this down. We're going to go through this, but we'll talk about this and then I'm going to go through this in order because I took an essay. Okay. I don't think I've studied this hard since university. Okay. So when crack cocaine became popular in the 1980s, this took over poor communities, especially African-American, because African-American communities have been poor since, because of slavery, let's be honest. And then the sentencing for crack cocaine was much harsher than those for powder cocaine. Powder cocaine was more suburban. The same amount of time in prison for 1 ounce of crack cocaine versus 100 gram, 1 ounce, or maybe it's 1 gram. Sorry. Basically, 1 gram or 1 ounce, I can't remember. I think it's 1 gram. 1 gram of crack cocaine versus 100 grams of powder.
So essentially you would need 100 times more coke on you to get the same as someone with one. And
let's be honest also that, the people that are using cocaine, they're less likely to be busted in the first place. So they're going to go bust, the urban, areas and the poor communities. So the rich, Wolf of Wall Street people using cocaine are not going to get busted.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's another factor.
Yeah.
Anyways. Okay. We're going to go through this in order. We're going to talk about it. This might be a long episode, guys. Just buckle up. Once again, we're going to link in the show notes where to watch this documentary. Luckily, Netflix made this free on YouTube right now. Yeah. So I don't know how long it's going to be there. Maybe they'll get rid of it. I don't know. I don't think so at this point. But if you don't have Netflix, you can still watch this. So we'll link it there. Yeah. If you have Netflix, you can watch it on Netflix. Okay. So one of the first things that they, of course, discuss is slavery, which was an economic system and a very, very powerful economic system. Exactly. It's basically what built most of, U.S., economy at that time, right?
And also I think with regards to that particular era as well, is it off the back of slavery is where the foundation of a lot of wealth was grown as well. So you look 100%. At especially in the South where they had, the cotton plantations and all these kind of things, you created this economic system whereby the individuals, the haves, the generally the white settlers that were there, they would exploit the black people, the slaves, and in doing so, they were able to amass quite a substantial amount of wealth. So already creating a massive level of discrepancy, right?
Exactly. And then the problem was that, so slavery was abolished. Yeah. And so right from there, you like you said, because the white people made all this money from the work of the slaves.
Exactly.
And, you know, through all of these industries that were built by slaves, they made all of this money. But then just because you abolish slavery and then now you free the slaves, but you don't do anything to repair that harm, then that is going to trickle through generations, because you haven't fixed, you know, you're not starting off on a clean slate, because you've already created this extreme, you know, like discriminatory, extreme, what do you call it? Disparity.
Disparity. Yeah.
Yes.
But
discrepancy.
Also,
I can't talk right now. I'm so mad.
I know. So much rage. But also I think in that as well, you're right. They abolished slavery, but at the same time as well, for those slaves that were abolished, it's like a new era for them as well, whereby I don't feel like the government really effectively gave them the tools to, entered into the workforce, or, this kind of stuff. And then also the people that, had previously, quote unquote, owned these people were mad because they didn't want to hire them on to pay them now onto their, farms or whatever else that they were working. So it created this massive, again, they would have created this massive rift already between whites and the blacks. So. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, exactly. So then these black people are they just like freed them.
Yeah.
And then what? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen? Well, because you're still living within this very racist society, just because you get rid of the slavery doesn't mean that it's going to fix the problem of racism.
Exactly.
So it wasn't because they thought, oh, black people are the same as us now, so we can abolish slavery. That's not what happened. So then one of the things that the documentary talks about is a crazy thing that happened basically after the abolishment of slavery. They, again, forgive me if I get the facts wrong, but basically one of the policies that they put forward was, this is when the 13th Amendment, so the 13th Amendment came out of, to abolish slavery. Yeah. But then they put a little clause in there that says, except as a punishment for crime. Okay. So then this was used as a tool and a loophole, and it's continuously used as a tool and a loophole to continuously discriminate against certain groups of people, especially colored people. So then what happened after slavery was abolished was that because of this constitution, they started basically incarcerating black people for very small crimes. So for example, like, I don't know, just like loitering or something, just like literally not even a crime. Yeah. And then they basically enslaved them again and made them do work as prisoners. Insanity.
It's crazy. I mean, I did know a little bit about that the prisons do use inmates for, projects and things like that. What I hadn't realized is what it stemmed from. So all of this situation going on as to why that happened. And also I didn't realize, like, nowadays, like, this is like they also said in the documentary, nowadays it's a multi-billion-dollar industry using prison labor.
Insane. I can't even believe it.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I didn't know that, I knew prisoners did some work. Yeah. But I was like, do they get paid for this? Like, I don't know. Do they get paid? Is that
from the sounds of it? From the sounds of it, and I could be wrong on this, from the sounds of that documentary, they don't really get paid at all. I think it's part of their punishment. Or I think
that's insane.
Yeah. I've heard of some programs where the prisoners have these work things where they do get paid, but it is quite a little amount, but at least some of them, but I think a majority of them, that's part of their punishment, is to do these really heavy manual labor projects, for example, building railroads, or, doing these kind of really manually intense jobs. And
so basically modern day slavery.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Yeah. So, I mean, and nowadays they said that they're using them for just about everything, like woodworks, growing and packaging potatoes, just the most random, stuff. But again, if and think about the competitive advantage that not competitive advantage, but that the company that's using,
because it cuts costs.
Exactly. Because they don't have to pay anything, which is so bad.
Fuck, every bad thing stems from fucking capitalist policies. I swear to motherfucking God. Okay? Don't fucking tell me that capitalism is perfect, because fuck me. Okay?
Because people are naturally greedy. That's
people are naturally greedy, and then you create these systems that are for profit, and that's the only thing that we are taught to care about when it comes to capitalism and when it comes to corporations. They only care about profit and the bottom line. So they want to cut anyway, okay, no. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we are. They're getting into a different topic now. Oh gosh.
Well, this is all due to like capitalism is literally how most of the reason why this whole slavery thing even, is a thing, or like
Exactly.
that concept of, economy and making a lot of money and cutting costs and taking advantage of people.
Well, the reason
Anyways.
you're right. The fundamental reason why like slavery happened in the first place in the U.S. is because they didn't want to pay people for that labor. Do you know what I mean? They wanted to bring,
Exactly.
they wanted free labor.
Well, first they stole the land from the Native Americans so that they had land.
Yeah.
And then they stole people from Africa, brought them to America. And then because they, God forbid they do the work themselves. They can't do that themselves. No. So now that they've stolen the land, they've stolen the people, they're going to put the people and fucking, make them do all the work. Okay. So then, slavery abolished, 13th Amendment, it's not doing anything. And then, so it was after the Civil War, apparently.
Yeah.
We're taking a history lesson today.
Yeah, we're taking a little historic ride.
Yeah, a historic ride through the racial injustices of the American system.
Yes.
Okay. So after the Civil War, Black people were arrested en masse for minor crimes and then forced to provide labor to rebuild the economy in the South after the Civil War.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning of the mythology of Black. Why can't I talk today? Oh my God. I can't talk. Okay. Yeah. That's the beginning of the mythology of Black criminality, where images of Black people committing crimes became implanted within like the American rhetoric. That's what I wrote here. Through movies like Birth of a Nation, apparently, which they talked about in
they talked about that a lot.
The film.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I didn't know what this film was about, but it looks like they basically made a Black man, which I think is a white man in blackface.
It is, 100%.
Based on what I saw.
Based on what I saw as well. That's exactly what it looked like.
Yeah. So they took a white man, put him in blackface, and then depicted him as a rapist.
Yeah. And this is a very good point, actually. Yeah, exactly. This is it. They were like, oh, you need to hide, blah, 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 blah. Like, because the Black men are all raping, and doing all this stuff, which is so bad because in the documentary, they said, actually, if you look at the actual figures and stats, it's the other way around. It's you have predominantly more so than someone Black raping a white woman. You have it the other way, where it's a white man raping a Black woman. So already there, if you just look at the stats, apparently that's exactly what's been going on. But of course, you have this movement during that period to really criminalize and make people afraid through images in the media and stuff of Black people in general. So, you see somebody walking across the street that's Black, you grab your, that lady's going to grab her purse now and get on edge because of the images that have been portrayed back then, and they mentioned
and still portrayed this day.
Yes, like you get shows like Cops and all of this stuff, like back in the day, like even a couple of years ago, and actually majority of the criminals that are shown on there are of color. When actually, it
was disproportionate. They said
yes, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you, Rose.
Well, apparently we're both not very good with the words today, but it's a very passionately charged conversation right now. So the thing is also, I just want to mention that, like, of course, Daniel and I knew that there was racist policies. I knew about systemic racism after I realized that systemic racism wasn't just about a specific like law that was like Black people can't vote, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I did not know to this extent. Until I watched this movie. Yeah. And I'm sure you are the same.
No, it was exactly the same for me.
How all of this is so connected.
Yeah.
And how it's like, without watching this, you cannot discuss, or without understanding this history, you cannot discuss this topic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it basically made all the pieces kind of like fit together. And then you have that kind of moment where you're like, because we already knew, and we already kind of like knew some of this stuff was going on, but we didn't have the full picture, put all the pieces together and realize to the extent of
how bad it is.
Exactly. So that was the big thing for me. It was like just the sheer extent of what is going on in the US and what has gone on for generations.
Yeah. And because it's never been fixed. That's the thing. It's like no one ever talked about it to fix it throughout the years, even though, you can say like, oh, we got rid of slavery, we got rid of these policies. But until you fix it and actually look back at history and try to like do something, I don't know what the answer is, but
exactly
until you have these conversations, you're not going to fix the situation. So anyway, okay. So next thing. So during this era where, Black people were, depicted very, very heavily criminalized and depicted as animalistic criminals.
Yeah.
A lot of lynchings happened against Black people, all over the place. And then when that became like less appropriate to attack Black people, this is when the Jim Crow laws passed. So this is when the whole, Black segregation between Black people, white people, that was passed.
Yeah.
So then that was also a problem. I don't know if the documentary touched too much on that, but another documentary you can watch is the show called Explained. And there's an episode called Racial Wealth Gap in the US or something like that.
Yeah.
And they also, that episode is also posted, I think, on YouTube, which I just found out.
Okay.
So that one talks about the reasons why there's such a big wealth disparity between African-American families in the US and white families in the US.
Yeah.
But anyways, because of these Jim Crow laws and segregation laws, that caused even more disparity because, for example, white neighborhoods were more affluent. And if a Black family were to try and move into those white neighborhoods, they would not be approved, or, those things would happen because white people were still afraid of Black people and they don't want Black people moving into their neighborhood because they think it's dangerous and it's going to push the housing prices down, or all kinds of fucking fucked up shit.
Exactly. And the interesting thing too, you mentioned, with these Jim Crow laws that came in, because there was that kind of, you had the lynching happen and then you have these laws come in. Well, when these laws came in, it kind of enabled other people that maybe wouldn't have taken part in the lynchings, but they still have the kind of these thoughts on racism and stuff. Are you okay there, Rose?
Sorry, I spilled water on myself.
Okay, I thought you were smelling a blanket. I was like, what is going on over there?
I spilled water on myself. It's my handkerchief.
Okay. But it kind of gave way for, other people to start that maybe might not have gotten involved in the lynchings and stuff, but now it gives them almost like a legal backing to say, if I operated a store, for example, I could say, within my legal right to be like, I'm not going to serve you because of the color of your skin, or,
100%.
You're not allowed to sit on this part of the bus. You have to sit at the back. This is the rules.
Yeah.
So that automatically creates a more of a separation than there already was. And it creates laws that help that back people that reinforce this bad behavior, I guess.
Yep. And exactly. And that's what happened. And then, slowly through lots of different hardships and activism, the Civil Rights Act passed. And around that same time, another interesting thing that the documentary talks about is that it was around that same time where the baby boomer generation was entering adulthood. So baby boomers, there's obviously an increase in population of people entering adulthood, which increase the amount of crime because just of the sheer volume of people becoming, the age where you might commit crime. Okay.
Yeah.
But then because it was unfortunately associated with the same time that the Civil Rights Act was passed, people then started associating that because, we gave Black people freedom, now we have more crime.
Yeah.
So that's another unfortunate part of what happened historically.
Yeah, a series of events. It's almost like, you're right. It's almost like they were saying, we've given, the civil rights movement, we've given Black people more liberation and rights and everything, and now this is how they're repaying us. There's an increase in crime.
Exactly.
And then it will create more of that kind of negative attitude around that.
Exactly. So it reinforces that idea that Black people are criminals, even though it could have just been that. And I mean, to be fair though, also, even if, I just want to say this, even if there are more Black people doing crime, it's you have to look at why that is the case.
Exactly.
Of course, they're going to be doing more crime if they're living in areas that are impoverished and they don't have resources.
Exactly.
It's not an accident that, impoverished neighborhoods have more criminals. That's
exactly.
just...
I bet you, I don't know a stat off the top of my head, but I can almost guarantee it. So there must be some out there somewhere where, because if you look at discrepancies between, if you were born into a family that had money or was moderately well off, probably your chances of becoming a criminal or engaging in criminal activity is so much less. And we did mention this in the George Floyd podcast as well, but so much less than when you grow up in poverty. And I think... and that's a key thing. And we mentioned about the whole, when the whole, what am I trying to say? I can't talk today either. When you had the huge slavery movement in the beginning, you created, like in the beginning of the U.S., like settlement and everything, you have this huge growth of wealth for certain individuals, white people exploiting black people, basically. And then it's going to create already this disparity in wealth that's going to continue because, again, if you're born into a family, like a rich white family, chances are you're not going to commit crime. You're not going to engage in those behaviors because you already have a kind of, what is that word? Oh my God, why can't I think of it? It's like
you already have privilege?
Yes, you already have privilege. Whereas if you were a slave that was recently freed with very limited job opportunities because maybe they don't want to hire you because of the color of your skin or whatever else, and you can't, you might be free in the eyes of the law at that time, but you're never able to kind of better yourself. So then that generation continually is struggling, right? So
yeah. And not to mention that, rich white people do commit crimes, but they're just not, they don't get convicted or they're not seen as criminals. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they can commit crimes at the high level, but we don't see them as thugs or criminals or anything like that because they're rich and they're powerful.
Exactly. Just on a side note on that, guys, if you have a chance, there's a really good documentary on Netflix about, I think it's Harvey Epstein. It's just called Epstein or something on there.
Oh God, I can't get myself to watch it.
And it's exactly about this. He's like a multi-billionaire and he did some really, really messed up stuff. And it just talks about how basically he got away with it for so long. And even in the eyes
of
Is it
Harvey Weinstein or is it Jeffrey Epstein?
Oh my God.
What's his name?
No, it's Jeffrey Epstein.
It's the Epstein.
Epstein, sorry, not Weinstein.
What's with these Epsteins and Weinsteins? Like, what the fuck,
I know
dude?
Weinstein was another guy that also did some really messed up stuff in Hollywood.
He did some like sexual predatory stuff.
Well, Epstein as well. So, and he's, again, because he was privileged and very, very wealthy, it shows that even that when he went to kind of trial, it's like not even a real trial. The first initial charges that he got were so ridiculous. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway,
because
I digress.
They have money.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, well, to that point, there is a little quote that I wrote down as well from the documentary. Somebody said, oh my God, where is it? Let's see. I need to find it because it was, we have a criminal justice system that treats you better if you are rich and guilty than if you are poor and innocent.
Oh, that's right. Like, I remember seeing this.
Yeah. Because I was like, damn.
Yeah, because it talked about bail, right? A big concept of that was bail. So if you're arrested for something and you're rich, you can post, or you have money, you can post your bail, whereas other people can't. So there's So yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that, guys. Yeah. We'll get to that. We're not even. It's crazy because there's so much. Like, I was rewatching this, by the way. I watched it twice so I could take notes the second time. And I was rewatching this and I was like, I can't believe how much I have to write down because there's so many things that I'm just like, this is fucking crazy. This is fucking insanity. And okay. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Okay. So then where are we? We are in, so then now we are in the 1970s. Yeah. Okay. Civil Rights Act has passed. Now, technically, under the eyes of the law, black and whites are equal, technically. Yeah. Okay. But then now we're in the 1970s, and apparently this is the era of mass incarceration, or the beginning of mass incarceration. And this is the Nixon era, when Nixon was president. Yeah. And so this is when the whole war on drugs thing became a big thing, where hundreds of thousands of people were getting arrested and jailed for low-level drug possession. And basically, this Nixon administration just kept talking about this war on drugs, war on drugs, war on drugs. Yeah. Apparently, it wasn't even that big of a deal. Like, it wasn't even that, it wasn't even that much of a deal. Yeah. That the average person was worrying about it, but they instilled fear into the average person. And then this, in turn, allowed them to throw a bunch of black people in jail. Yeah. It's like they created basically widespread panic for something that was not worthy or not. It wasn't. They're making a mountain. It wasn't as big of a problem.
Yeah, it wasn't as big of a problem as they made it seem. They made it seem like every single person at every street corner is dealing crack cocaine and dealing drugs and everything, and that it was just prolifically everywhere, which was not the case. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I have this crazy thing. So then this part was crazy. So later on, I don't know when, but the Nixon administration admitted that the war on drugs was just a ploy to throw black people in jail.
Yes, they
quoted
someone.
This part was insanity. I have the quote. I fucking wrote this shit down because it's fucking crazy.
It's insane.
So the Nixon advisor, John Ehrlichman, whatever his name is, said, okay, and I quote, sorry if I got I didn't get every single word right, but the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people.
Yes.
We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. What the actual fucking fuck? It's like they actually admitted this.
Yeah. So they knew
this was in 1970.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
Exactly. So don't tell me this is the proof of systemic racism at play here.
Exactly. And they actually have him in that documentary speaking and quoted him. And it's, you know, you what more evidence do you need? Do you know what I mean? You literally are having government officials. And he's not the only one in this documentary that admitted to making a mistake.
There's more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're getting there. We're getting there.
The tip of the iceberg, guys.
Yes. So basically, they've created this war on drugs, quote unquote, to pretend that that was the problem, but really this was just their way of putting black people in jail. And I think one of the reasons, I think one of my friends said this, and I think they did touch on this in the documentary, but not heavily. One of the reasons is because when you become a criminal, you actually can't vote, I believe, forever. Yeah. I think. I don't know if that's still the case, but at least at that time, that was the case. And who votes for Republicans more? White people. Who votes for Democrats more? Black people. So if you throw more black people in jail, they can't vote for the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's another factor to take into consideration here. This is all very fucking crazy. Okay, next.
No, but I just couldn't believe that, just on a side note, that they had a government official that was part of the administration.
That just admitted it.
So, and he wasn't the only one. So it just shows you again, actions and evidence speaks volumes, you know? Yeah.
For sure. Okay. So then, so that I have the other person. So this was in 1981, Reagan. So Ronald Reagan, is that Ronald?
Yeah.
Is it Ronald
Reagan?
So, yeah. So he was the next president after Nixon, I believe.
Yeah, following the Nixon.
And he was a fucking awful person. Can I just say that? He was fucking awful, based on everything.
Yeah.
So this guy, let me just go on a fucking rant here. This guy pretends, everyone talks about, all the fucking conservatives talks about, oh my God, like Ronald Reagan is the one that like made our economy so great and fantastic.
Yeah.
And then this documentary shows you that, and this is the fact, that under Reagan's, you know, what do you call it? Like under Reagan's presidential time.
Yeah.
Maybe he made certain people richer, but the poverty rates
increased so much.
Exactly. It was insanity because he didn't care about the people that were poor. He only cared about the rich people.
Well, I love the one quote that he said. He was like, you know, I understand
I think I know which one.
That poverty is increasing. It is increasing. However, it's increasing at a slower rate than it did last year or something like this. And we were like, but it's still increasing.
But it's increasing.
And I was like,
and then he's like, unfortunately, we don't have money for these social programs, so you're just going to have to pay it out of your pocket.
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, what the fucking fuck? It's like, I think the reason why they turn to those social programs is because they don't have money out of their fucking pocket.
Exactly.
Like, are you fucking, oh God.
And part of the reason why, you know, a lot of people also got wealthy in this era as well is because he offered massive tax cuts, didn't he, to a lot of corporations and, you know, high net worth individuals. So, you know, right then and there, they're paying less tax, which also means less government funding for those exact programs. So, you know, maybe, you know, him saying, you know, oh, sorry, we don't have the money. Well, yeah, we don't have the money because you cut all the corporate taxes that probably make the country, you know, millions, if not billions a year in tax revenue. So there's a reason there's no budget for it because you've cut all the taxes, or not all of them, but like a huge amount of it. So, and thus increasing the discrepancy of wealth.
Which made it even worse. But anyway, so his campaign strategist, Lee Atwater, in 1981 was caught on tape explaining what's called the Southern strategy. So I think that's the Southern strategy is like trying to win the Southern vote. And so basically I'm going to quote, like I can't quote it all, but I wrote it down as much as I could. So you start out, so this is what he said, okay? You start out in 1984 by saying N-word, N-word, N-word. And he said it, okay? By 1968, you can't say the N-word because that hurts you. it backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing or other, words.
Yeah.
And then now you're getting so abstract. So you're talking about cutting taxes and all of the things that are to do with the economy.
Yeah.
And the byproduct is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. He said that.
Yeah.
So what he's basically saying, and let me just lay it out for you. What he's basically saying is that back then you were allowed to be overtly racist.
Mm-hmm.
But then now, slowly over time, you can't be overtly racist. You have to do it in a more subtle way. And then, over time, again, you do it in a slightly more subtle way. You talk about the economy, you talk about cutting taxes, all of these things, but you're still hurting the black community, and you know that you're doing it.
Exactly. Well, and this is the thing about the subtleties of it. Not the subtleties, but like you said, back in, during that time, you could be way more blatantly racist. And even with, the Jim Crow laws as well, you could literally just be like, get off this bus or whatever,
Yeah.
And now they're like, really careful, but still fundamentally the goal is the same. So, the goal is to, like he said, it's going to hurt black people more than white people. So, the blatant, obviousness of the racism is gone, but the fundamental goal of what they're trying to achieve is still there, which is horrendous.
Yeah. And I think now, to kind of digress a little bit, now that we're kind of in this era where I don't even know if at this point all of this has happened and so much has trickled that I think now I don't want to say that people are being blatantly I want to hurt, the black community. I want to make sure that black people are thrown in jail. They're not going to, I don't think they understand themselves that that's what they want to do or that that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
But now because of all of these things that have already created such a disparity between black people and white people, it is the unfortunate result when when you have this system that continuously discriminates against certain communities, which are predominantly black communities.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. It's interesting that you say that because there's another quote from this documentary where towards the end, one of the guys was saying, a lot of people say, how could people not stand up back in that era, back when it was so blatant, where they were saying, oh, this, how could you live like that? And he's like, well, we need to wake up. We're still living in an era like this,
Exactly.
So
we're just not aware of it.
Exactly.
Even the people doing the maybe, discriminatory things, they may not even be aware of it because it's been, trickled down so much, they don't even realize. And that's why it's important to kind of look at this history.
Exactly.
Anyway. Okay. So then Bill Clinton ran for president, and because all of the Democrats kept losing because they were quite not tough on crime.
Exactly.
So he decided to be even more tough on crime.
They were saying that there was no way during this era to win a presidential campaign and appear soft on crime. Everyone that had won had a really tough stance on cracking down on crime. And you're right. So that's when Bill Clinton comes in, and he was part of the Democratic Party, right?
Yes, he was. Yeah. So he apparently made a bunch of laws like mandatory minimum sentences where people would get a mandatory minimum sentence for whatever crime, for a certain crime, right?
Yeah.
No matter what the circumstances. So basically, and it just resulted in longer sentences for a lot of people. He did a massive expansion of the prison system. And then later on, they had this clip of Bill Clinton admitting that he was wrong and he made a mistake. I mean, fuck me.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And I think the thing that was worse than the mandatory minimum is still really, really bad because it does mean that basically, because the whole idea is that the judge can take into consideration situational circumstances and things that have gone on and thereby come up with a more fair ruling and say, depending on the circumstance, whereas he took that power away so that it was basically like they have to serve a minimum amount of time for certain crimes. The judge could increase that, but they have no ability to decrease that on other factors. And then the other key thing was that I think is almost worse. They're both not great policies, but the other one was the 3 strikes you're out campaign. So that was just the sense that, and the way that he said it sounds a little bit different than the way that it was done in practice. Cause he's like, you commit 3 violent crimes and you're put away forever. That's not really how he talks, but and
it's kind of how he talks.
It is kind of, yeah. And I think the thing is what happened in practice is people that were doing more of what would be considered kind of petty crime or not as serious, like possession of a small amount of marijuana or things like this. And they were also falling into this 3 strikes you're out. And they were getting these people that were incarcerated for life after committing 3 small kind of felonies, you know? So it was like, and that's and led to more of a boom in the ever growing prison population.
Mm-hmm. And like, you know what? It's fine that you're admitting it, but like, let's now talk about a fucking solution.
Exactly.
Anyway, so then this is just the fucking first half of the goddamn movie. Okay.
God damn.
This is just fucking crazy. Okay. So then this whole mass incarceration, you know, prisons are everywhere. They're like building all these fucking prisons. This all came to be. And now we've created already the system that started just putting people in jail for fucking God knows what. And so many people are in jail. It's a big problem. And then they start talking about what is called ALEC, which is apparently a private club where the members of this private club are politicians and corporations. And under the umbrella of ALEC, corporate members get to propose laws to their political counterparts. So talk about a fucking conflict of interest.
100%.
Like, fucking corruption, like left, right, and center. It's blatant corruption.
That is corruption at its best, because I mean, if I understand that correctly, if I was a large corporation that was backing a certain political party, I could suggest laws or bills to be passed through. And obviously those constituents, it would be in their best interest to pass those laws, because I might be a very, you know, influential.
You'd be a lobbyist.
Exactly. And also have a lot of money and power behind myself. So then it would be in their best interest to pass those laws. And interestingly, I think that they said in some of them, like some of the politicians were brushing it off and saying that this was a bill or whatever that they had put into play and they wanted to do. And they accidentally left the ALEC letterhead, or stamp on the actual bill.
The logo.
Yeah. And people being like, well, I don't think that's actually accurate, because I can see here that it's not the case. So
yeah, it's crazy. So basically at ALEC task force meetings, corporate lobbyists secretly vote as equals with lawmakers on bills that those lawmakers introduce to become laws in the states.
Yeah.
And then, so part of ALEC was the Corrections Corporations of America, the CCA, which is a private prison corporation. So this was part of ALEC, and then they started making contracts with states and governments, and then the states were required to keep these prisons filled, because if you have a private prison system, you are incentivized to put more people in prison. So this was a growth industry in the 1980s and 90s, a growth industry. How sick does that sound?
This is the thing. Again, we talked about how a lot of this stuff is it's basically the foundation of it stems from capitalism. And this is another key example as to how capitalism continued to drive this, kind of racial injustice bus, basically, because you have the it's a CCA, right? Corrections.
The CCA.
Yeah, CCA. And again, this shows you that part of this problem is that this part of the correctional facility was privatized and highly profitable, and the incentive there is to have more people incarcerated. So it's just like really, really crazy. Like I don't even know. Like it's.
And when the thing is, I didn't actually understand, because I knew that prisons in America, like some of the prisons are private. Yeah. And I was like, I don't understand how that works. Like, how does a prison make money by putting people in jail? And I realized it's because they make contracts with governments, and then they are paid per person. So like if a person goes into prison, they have to be paid like a certain amount to like basically, cover the costs of them, being in prison. So they get paid a certain amount by the government, I believe. Am I right? Okay.
Yeah. This is my understanding as well. And then the government pays a fee per person. And then it's part of that company, the CCA, that they have to feed, shelter, they have to provide security, all of that kind of stuff, right?
So then they make, so let's say a government gives them $100 per, I don't know, prisoner.
Inmate,
Let's just whatever. $100. So out of that $100, basically, this is a for-profit system. So they have to make a profit out of that $100. So what they do is they will, provide basically shitty fucking conditions. So basically they want to drive down the costs. So they want to basically drive down the cost. So whatever is left over, they can pocket.
Exactly.
So it's fucked up. So they will get incentivized for putting more people in prison and then giving them shittier and shittier conditions.
Yeah. Well, and it's like they also subcontract a lot of their things out. So like, for example, the providers for food and everything else. And again, they're all given these long tenor contracts. So there's actually no, with probably limited break clauses. And a lot of them, so once they get these contracts that might be for 10, 15 years, there's not really an incentive until close to probably the renewal date to do anything beneficial or good for these people, because they already have the contract for X number of years. So why would they, try to improve the living conditions and stuff? No, they're going to try to squeeze as much as they can out of that system in the 10, 15 years or however long the contract is, right?
Yeah.
But how crazy is it that the prisons are run by private companies?
I know. It's insanity. Why do you have a system? Why do you have a system that does not want to rehabilitate your prisoners? Yeah. Instead, you want to punish them, put people in prison because it's going to give you money. You're going to put innocent people that have had very little crime, like they had a little bit of marijuana on them. Oh my God. Yeah. What a fucking terrible crime. Let me put you away for like months or years. And then they get fucked over because they're in prison and then they are scarred. They're there with other like maybe real fucking criminals. Yeah. And then what are they going to learn in that time that they are in motherfucking prison? Exactly. They're going to learn to be, upstanding citizens in a prison that provides them shittier and shittier conditions.
Exactly. But that's what they say. Like a lot of this stuff is cyclical, right? So it's like, there's so many factors. Like we talked about, the chances if you come from poverty, the chances of you getting incarcerated are higher. But even if you don't necessarily come from poverty, but you get, arrested on a misdemeanor or something really, really small, and then you're shoved in prison for a long time with people that are criminals, that's going to break you as a person and impact you. There was a good example of one guy that I can't remember his name.
Khalif Browder. Yeah. The guy that got wrongly accused.
Yes. And he was...
Oh my God, his story is so sad.
It's so sad. And he basically they were trying to get a plea deal out of him. They said, look, just admit to this and, you'll get however many years or whatever, or you could leave, or not leave, but like, I can't remember that whole story. And he's like, no, I'm not going to plead to something that I did not do. So he ends up staying in prison for 3 years or 2 or 3 years in like isolation. He gets attacked by other inmates all the time. He gets attacked by the guards. Then he finally leaves because he was innocent, and then a couple of years later, he ends up committing suicide. So
So I wrote down his story because it's really sad. Well, I wrote it kind of like you pretty much told it all, but basically he was accused of stealing a backpack. Stealing a backpack. He was 16 years old. He was on the street. He had his own backpack, and he was accused of stealing a backpack, and then he was jailed. Why the fuck are you being jailed for stealing a motherfucking backpack in the first place? Even if he didn't do it or not do it. Like even if he did do it, why the fuck are you being jailed for stealing a backpack? Exactly. Anyways, stealing a backpack, and then his bail was $10,000. What the fuck is this shit?
But then it just shows you again, first of all, if it was somebody white that got charged with the same crime, they wouldn't have just gone to prison anyway. They would have got a slap on the wrist. But even if they did get into that same circumstance and they came from money, their parents or whoever would post bail for them and they'd leave. Do you know what I mean? So,
exactly. And then they'd be fine. But then, so then this is when, his bail was $10,000. He couldn't pay the bail, of course, because what the fuck? $10,000. Exactly. And then apparently they gave them this like plea bargain. And I don't even understand this plea bargain. Is it basically like, because I've seen different interviews where they said that, if you plead guilty, you'll get like 2 years versus if you go to trial, you might get 15 years or something like that. Yeah. Like, would they just let you go if you plead guilty? Is that how it works?
No, I think you would still have to serve time. Yeah, you would still have to serve. Yeah. Because you still have to, pay for your
pay your dues, even though you didn't fucking do anything.
But I think part of the reason why, well, one, he didn't commit the crime, so that's why he didn't want to plea. But also, I think because they mentioned this in the documentary as well, is once you are convicted of a crime, it is like a stamp on your kind of name, and so later on, so if, for example, if you get wrongly convicted, or not wrongly convicted, if you don't do the plea bargain and you get out like he did, he won't be branded as necessarily a criminal because there was no crime committed. However, if he took the plea bargain, even if he got released 2 or 3 years later, he would be brandished as a criminal, even if it's a crime he didn't commit, but he just took the plea bargain. Right. So that's my understanding as to why he wouldn't want to do that.
I think you're right. Yeah. And they said that 97% of people locked up have a plea bargain and they don't actually go to trial. Insane. insane. And then they said, if you exercise your rights to a trial, you'll be punished more. So they don't want you to go to trial. They just want you to fucking take the plea bargain.
Exactly.
So then this guy, unfortunately for him, I mean, God, his story is so sad. So I think there's actually a documentary on his story on Netflix as well, which I need to watch. I think I started watching it a few years ago, and then I was like, oh my God, I can't watch this. It's like too sad.
Yeah.
Anyways, he was in jail for 3 years, and he spent about 2 years in solitary confinement. And then, of course, they're not going to give him the mental health. You know, like, first of all, solitary confinement already is going to fuck up your mental health. Like, that is the worst. That is one of the worst things that anyone could go through.
And I think I didn't fully understand this. I always knew this. I always knew that solitary confinement, it really messes with your mind and everything else. But think about like what we've all just experienced doing quarantine and everything else, and how our emotions, and we've been in our houses and then comfortable.
I know,
you know what I mean?
We've been comfortable.
These people that are put in solitary confinement are generally put into a room that has no light, and they have limited human interaction, and it's pitch black. So like, imagine
I don't know if they're pitch black, but it's definitely no windows.
Yeah, there's no windows.
I think pitch black. I think that's. Oh my God, if that was the case. Like, that would be very bad.
Yeah, maybe that was the olden days. I could be wrong on that one. But
yeah,
it's
that was the olden days.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like there's a lot of places with no windows. They don't have contact with other inmates. And that is still, apparently in 2020, that is still a thing. Fucked up. And then...
It's messed up.
Yeah, and then he got beat up in jail multiple times, and just so many fucked up things happened to this poor kid.
Yeah.
And then 2 years after his release, he killed himself at the age of 22. He tried to kill
so
himself multiple
sad.
times. I know, it's like the worst. Yeah.
I think it's just the way that probably the toll that it took on him mentally, you know what I mean? Not just being in the solitary confinement, but the whole prison. And then also, you know, coming to that realization, or not even that realization, probably already knowing, but being a product of a country that really doesn't support you because of the color of your skin, you know, in that situation. So, and I think, you know, that would be really, really hard to come back from, you know? And it is just like really, really sad. And I think to myself, like, you know, for the most part, if I was ever put behind bars, it would mess me up. Like, it would just
100%
mess me up, you know, like I would not be the same person that went in, even if I was only for a year or two, because, you know, the shit that goes on in there, it's not a pleasant environment. So it's going to mess you up mentally.
He was accused of stealing a backpack. How is this even a crime? How are you putting people in jail for this? It is fucking, I mean, of course it's a crime, but it's a very, very, very fucking petty crime.
Exactly. Like, yeah.
And like, I'm sorry, can't you just like check what's in the backpack and like, I don't know. They just wanted to throw him in prison. Basically, they just wanted to fucking throw someone in prison. Maybe they needed to meet a quota, which is fucked up. But this is what happens when you take people and turn them into profit.
Commodities.
Okay? Yeah. Okay, so then another thing that they, of course, talked about was the prison system is focused on punishment rather than rehabilitation. So they become basically broken within the system, like we just talked about, and there's very little done to rehabilitate them. So the prison system in the US is not focused on actually making these people better people. Because then after they come out, which you're right, this is probably why a lot of people don't want to plead guilty, because it's hard to get a job.
Exactly.
It's hard to, you know, because you're going to have to say, I'm a convicted felon or I'm a convicted whatever. You can't get student loans, private rentals. It's hard for life insurance. And apparently I don't know, again, I'm not sure about the voting law, but apparently you can't vote.
Yeah. So my question then would be, how are these individuals that are supposed to, you know, reintegrate into society, how are they able to do that? Because essentially the government is taking away some of the fundamentals of how you integrate into a society. You know, if you're trying to, like, it's just, and then what's going to happen is they're going to end up back in the prison system.
Yeah.
Like, because if
and then you ask, why are they committing so many crimes?
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, you're right. Like, if they, especially like in their job application, you have to probably, actually most places you have to indicate it. They do criminal checks, and that's going to definitely hinder you in getting a job. And in that case, if you can't get a, you know, regular job, what else are you going to do? You have to make money to live.
Exactly. And
so
then people,
you're forcing the hand of people.
Exactly. You are forcing people into a desperate situation, and they can't integrate into society. What the fuck are they supposed to fucking do? You don't have fucking programs to help them feed their fucking family. You don't have a way of them to integrate back into society and become, you know, an upstanding citizen. So of course they're going to commit more crimes. And then what happens is you're going to put innocent people in jail for like having a little marijuana on them or having a little crack cocaine or whatever. You put them in jail for like,
allegedly stealing a backpack. And then they have this criminal record on them. Yeah.
So for something, they were maybe, a little troublesome teen, maybe, maybe they had a little, little bit of, like how many of us have gotten in trouble as a teen? Like so many of us.
Exactly.
But then some of these people go into jail and then they come out, can't get a job and can't integrate back into society. And then they're going to become worse criminals as a result of that.
Exactly. Because it's the same. It's just like we just have to think of it logically as our own individuals. If I was in a situation whereby I couldn't get a job, there was nobody willing to hire me, I had no support from my friends or family, I was by myself or whatever. I have to eat. I have to make money.
Yeah.
What other options do I have? You know what I mean? Like if that's the hand that's dealt to you. Mm-hmm. I can see why that would become, and they always do say about this like prison cycle and that this whole secular cycle of criminology of criminals, right? Like people that get banished, people that get banished. No,
I don't know.
Anyway,
banished. I don't know.
Branded.
Words.
Sorry, branded. People that get branded as criminals and then they end up in this system. It's often quite hard to get out of it. Because of exactly what we mentioned. So
exactly. So one of the things that I want to touch on is because some people have come out and they were saying stuff like, "Oh, George Floyd was a criminal. He had a criminal past." Of course, like they say, and then they say, "Well, of course, what happened to him was unfair, but stop branding him as this like angel." I'm like, no one is branding him as a fucking angel. First of all, like I'm not sitting here dissecting his fucking life and seeing if he's worthy of our sympathy. I'm not going to look past at his past wrongdoings or right doings and make a judgment call as to whether or not, I'm going to be sympathetic to a man that got fucking killed on the street by a police officer for a fucking forged check or whatever the fuck it was.
Exactly.
What I'm concerned about is the fact that this man, for no reason at all, was killed on the street by a police officer because he was fucking black. Let's be motherfucking honest. And then the thing is, this woman, oh my God, I hate this woman. This woman, there's this black woman that is like conservative, and I think she's paid by I think she's like funded by like right-wing, corporations or something like that. Anyways, she comes out and she does this whole fucking video, which scarily enough, a lot of people were like, go you, like, I'm glad you said this. Because she was like going off about how he has this like huge criminal past, and she starts like listing his criminal history. And first of all, it's been a long time since he's actually been convicted of anything, but it's funny because like half of the shit that she listed is like literally he went to jail for like 10 months for having less than an ounce of cocaine on him or something along those lines. So he's gone to jail a few times because of those exact same petty crimes that we just discussed, having possession of drugs.
Yeah.
So then why is he in jail in the first place? Let's fucking talk about that shit. You put these people in jail for absolutely no fucking reason, and then you ask why? Oh, why are they committing crimes?
It's crazy.
Anyways,
the whole thing is just like, and again, with that particular example, what happened with George Floyd, and what often happens to a lot of other people. Again, we never said at one point we're not saying that person's an angel or whatever else, but you need to analyze the situation and look at what happened. And I think that the key thing here is regardless of what crime he allegedly committed, be that the forged check, be that what maybe he killed somebody, we don't know. Well, we don't know, right? But well, we do know. We know what he was. I'm just using this as an example. Yeah,
but even if it was the worst case scenario and he was a fucking serial killer.
Exactly. Even if it was that
Ted Bundy got a fucking trial.
But this is it. Even if that was the extreme, because I don't think there's really much worse crime that you can do than killing another person. Is you are entitled to that trial. And you're innocent until proven guilty. And it's the action of somebody that's in a position of power that we are taught to trust in society, and someone that we call when things go wrong, that they're clearly violating that level of trust. And it's, through, a a blatant violation of that individual's rights because of the color of their skin. So,
Exactly.
you know, that's the issue there. We weren't talking about whether or not, you know, George Floyd committed a crime, whether or not he was an angel in his life. None of that is actually irrelevant. It's what happened in that moment. It's what happened in that moment.
Irrelevant. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So then let's look at the, I'm just going to, okay. So lifetime likelihood of imprisonment. I believe this is for men. Okay. So this, for white men, it is 1 out of 17 likelihood for imprisonment. For black men, it is 1 out of 3. Yeah. 1 out of 3. This is a problem. This is a fucking problem. And like we discussed in the beginning, black men account for 6.5% of USA population and 40% of prison population in the United States. Something is fucked up.
Yeah.
Something is fucked up. The math does not add up.
No.
Okay? And again, even if you were to take the stance, which is not true, even if you were to take the stance that these are all fucking criminals. Oh my God, they're all criminals. Okay, so then why is that the case? Let's address that as well. But fact of the matter is, most of these people, a lot of these people are charged for very minor crimes like we've just seen here. Forged checks, fucking possession of cocaine or possession of crack, fucking, you know, stealing a backpack, like crazy shit.
You know what would be a really interesting study? I'm not sure if it's been done or not, but like I think what would be really, really interesting is to analyze the demographics. Well, I mean, the demographics of the U.S. prison has already been analyzed, but looking at the nature of the crimes, just to see, because I think you're right. I think that if you look at those,
I'm sure there are.
I could put money on it. I bet you there is. But if you look at, you know, visible minorities and the seriousness of the overall seriousness of their crimes versus, you know, if you look at white people that are in prison and the seriousness of their crimes, I could almost bet that the seriousness of the white people's crimes that they're in prison for would be more.
They're more serious. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just, throwing things out there. I don't know, guys. Like, I don't want you to think on the podcast, I haven't done any research on this. I'm just throwing this out as my own hypothesis, which further research is needed. Well, so,
I mean, based on these numbers, I don't think it's a very crazy hypothesis. Yeah. Let me see if I can find a quick statistic here. So, oh my gosh, let's see.
It might African
Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. Let me just see. Come on, give me some minor crimes or not minor crimes. Okay, so drug sentencing disparities. So this could be an interesting one.
Yeah.
In the 2015 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, about 17 million whites and 4 million African Americans reported having used an illicit drug within the last month. African Americans and whites use drugs at similar rates, but the imprisonment rate of African Americans for drug charges is almost 6 times that of whites. African Americans represent 12.5% of illicit drug users, but 29% of those arrested for drug offenses and 33% of those incarcerated in state facilities for drug offenses. So yes.
There we go. I rest my case. Yeah. There we go.
It's right.
Thank you for that, Rose.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's not a surprise. It's very obvious when you look at these numbers. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Okay. So then I just want to the lady at the end here said this quote that I tried to write down as much as I could, but I'm going to read it out because it kind of sums up this whole thing here. So, throughout American history, African Americans have repeatedly been controlled through systems of racial and social control that appear to die, but then are reborn in new form, tailored to the needs and constraints of time. After the collapse of slavery, a new system was born, convict leasing. So this is when they started convicting, black people for, nothing, and then putting them to work, so which was a new form of slavery. Then a new system was born, which was the Jim Crow system. So that relegated the African Americans to a permanent second-class status. And now we have a new system of mass incarceration, which strips millions of poor people, overwhelmingly poor people of color, of the rights, of the very rights of the civil rights movement. So they don't have these same rights because, again, they can't vote, they can't do these things. Yeah. So there you go.
And it's interesting because it does keep shifting as the time keeps shifting, because they mentioned this briefly in the documentary, and I might get this wrong, but you know how before it was the government, the private company, the CCA, the Criminal Corrections Association or whatever it was. So they were profiting from having people incarcerated. Now there's like this new wave that's coming through where they're doing a lot more like, they were talking about like home arrests or like doing probation and things like that. And they were talking about how now the company that does the like the ankle bracelets
to keep people staying at home.
So they're now part of, we mentioned about ALEC before. So apparently the CCA is no longer as big of an influence and not part of the ALEC group. And this company that makes these ankle bracelets and focuses on probation officers and all this kind of stuff, they've become part of the ALEC group. So now we're seeing in the US, I don't know if it's exactly happened yet, but they mentioned this in the documentary. They're seeing this shift to, instead of incarceration, they're thinking now moving towards home arrest, probation, this kind of stuff, because that company seeks to benefit. And that's the laws that are going to get pushed through ALEC, because now the CCA is not part of the ALEC. And they're like, oh, well, we're not making money from you anymore.
Do these people not have souls? Like, do they actually not have souls?
I don't know. Like, you would just think that you would just, if you worked for a company like that, you would just feel
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. It's literally insane. I mean, I think if you worked for the company, they would tell you things, and you would probably tell yourself that it's not, that this isn't real. Like, this isn't the case. Like, they had that guy from ALEC that did the interview in the movie. Yeah. And like, he was just like, he never said anything of, substance. He just basically just denied that all of those things ever, are the case, even though it's just out there and it's so obvious.
Well, I think he'd had one too many glasses of the company Kool-Aid. So, he was definitely a very much an ALEC supporter. I mean, obviously he's an employee there. So,
my God.
But you're right. He didn't really say anything too much of substance, and he didn't really say anything. I think he didn't really he didn't admit to any wrongdoings. And I do think if we're having like another issue that I had with this documentary, not an issue with the documentary itself, but the content, was the fact that you have somebody like Bill Clinton coming forward and admitting that some of the bills and stuff that they passed weren't effective in achieving what they were trying to, and that there was wrong. That should automatically place a, what's it called? Like a pressure or a review of that particular law, where it should be like, actually, we need to look at this now. But it doesn't seem to be that's the case that's happening. It's still continuing.
Because everyone's comfortable now. And because, like they said, it's very difficult to change and reform this prison system, because now there's so much money involved. So now we've got all of these corporations that are tied to this private prison system. And then now we've got people working within the prison system. That's all tied to a bunch of corporations where they gain something from having these prisoners do their work. So they want more prisoners there too.
You literally have, so you have the prison industry, which is in itself makes millions and millions of dollars. Then you have this labor of this essentially free labor of convicts, which they said, and I think that, and don't quote me on this, but I think they said it's almost $900 million worth of labor or something that they're providing.
Something like that. It's insane.
Almost $1 trillion of free labor for companies. And these corporations are not going to want to get rid of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's in their best interest for them to continue with this whole process, Yeah. So, I mean, the question that remains is, or not remains, but the question is, how does the U.S. and probably in maybe a smaller regards in other countries and stuff, but primarily this documentary was focused on the U.S. and the issues there.
This was focused on the U.S. Yeah.
How do they go about rectifying these issues, and how do they go about reforming not only what's going on with at an individual level, but at a societal level that is looking at, has had this built up view of systemic racism. It's been going on for so long. How do you correct that? Because there's more to do than just because we're not just talking about the criminals that are incarcerated. We're talking about a societal view that needs to be shifted,
Yeah. Well, I think it's starting with the riots.
Yeah. Well,
it's starting with,
They said that these riots with the global riots and everything that's going on, it is actually, the fact that it took place in so many countries and stuff as well. It's the biggest riot ever.
Yeah. I think so. Because now I think, thanks to social media and internet, and I think it's also, again, because of the fact that we were in lockdown mode, we were, COVID mode, people are already a little bit
riled up.
Yeah, riled up a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're spending a little bit more time maybe on the internet, and we see these things. So we've kind of come together more more so than we would otherwise, because if we were just like living life as normal, then maybe we wouldn't have paid so much attention to this story.
Exactly.
So, you know, in some ways it's been a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I don't know the solution. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to fix the solution, but I think how it starts is, having these conversations is number one. And
100%.
Understanding this history. Because if you don't understand it, you cannot change things. Because you're right. If you just look at right now in this moment of time and look at, there's no law in place that says we can put more Black people in jail than white people. Yeah. So there's no racism here. So that's what a lot of people are saying. They're like, there's no such thing as racism. It's just that Black people commit more crime. Yeah. So therefore they should be arrested. But until you understand, anybody that thinks that way needs to watch this documentary and tell me why they think that way after watching this documentary.
It's an eye opener.
Yeah.
It is an eye opener. And again, like just speaking on my behalf, I understood some of the stuff that went on, like it's to some level, but to the level that they go in this documentary was mind blowing. And actually it was on Netflix that I watched it. There was an after interview with the director and Oprah, and they were talking about it. And even Oprah was like,
Ava. Is that her name? Ava?
Yeah, Ava. And her and Oprah were talking about this, and Oprah was like, this documentary, she's like, you just were able to cram so much into the like kind of 90 minutes or 100 minutes that the documentary was. And a lot of it is stuff that, is really, it's stuff that she didn't know either. It's coming to the forefront of like tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff. And even the director of the documentary, Ava, was talking about, she didn't know about the whole Alex situation either. That was something that they just uncovered while they were doing the whole documentary. Yeah. So there was a learning process there for them.
It's not even just white people that don't know this. It's like even Black people, a lot of Black people probably don't know this.
Exactly. So just crazy.
There's another great documentary by, I think, the same director. Well, it's not a documentary actually. It's called When They See Us. Have you watched it, Daniel?
Yes. No, I haven't watched it yet.
You need to watch it.
It's on my list of to watch.
Prepare the tissues. Prepare the fucking tissues.
I don't know how much more this I can take, Rose.
I don't know. I think. Okay. Well, important note is to maybe not watch all of these all at once, because you might go into a dark place. Okay. Yeah. So take care of your mental health. Make sure you're. It's okay if you don't constantly consume this, because it's a lot to take in.
It is.
So, but when, after you have your little fun, by the way, it's Daniel's birthday soon. So everyone wish him a happy birthday.
Oh, thanks,
By the time this comes out, it'll be after the fact, but,
yeah, true.
So the documentary, it's a dramatization of a real life situation. So 5 Black boys were arrested and convicted of raping and assaulting a white woman in Central Park. Yeah. So this was a big story, and they're called the Central Park 5, and they were convicted. They spent a lot of time in jail, and they were finally released after, quite a few years. Yeah. And it's like their story, but like dramatized, and it's so sad, and it's just it's just one example of,
of many.
The lives. Yeah. One example of so many lives that are ruined because of situations like this. Yeah. So, whew.
Yeah, that's, oh God. And I mean, that's
it's a sad one.
That's the thing that's sad is like, we're seeing some of it like at the forefront, like the George Floyd thing, When They See Us, this kind of stuff. But then you have to think that this representation in our media right now is probably only a small amount of what is going on. So think of all the lives that have been impacted and destroyed.
We don't see their, and
we never see their stories.
Story, exactly.
Yeah. So, well, I'm hoping, like you said, though, this situation with the COVID and everything, I think this might be something positive that comes out of it. Cause obviously this whole situation has been crazy with Corona and everything else. But I think in a way, when this happened with George Floyd, I think it kind of, because of all these, it was like a perfect storm of different factors. It really kind of like I said earlier in this podcast, it really, really drove continued momentum. You know what I mean? So this movement was already happening, and it's been happening for a number of years, but this kind of has been a global explosion, if you will. And I think so I'm hoping that this is something that's positive that we can all take from this Corona situation. And hopefully this will start to see a wave of change, not just in people's mindsets, but in some of the legislation and things that are in place in the US. and other countries that probably have similar kind of laws and things like that. So,
well, I mean, you know, the U.S. looks like a fucking war zone right now.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It is
and
nuts.
Trump is crazier than ever before.
Oh God.
And it's absolutely just. Mm-hmm. I mean, here's the thing: the violence. I just want to say a little bit something about the violence and the looting or whatever that's happening. It's not that I condone this. Okay, it's not like I'm like, woohoo, go and destroy small businesses. Of course, I don't want that. Yeah. But you push people and you push people and you push people and you push people and you discriminate and you oppress and you put people in prisons for no reason and you kill people on the street, and then you are surprised that people are mad and destroying things. Like, really? Like, this doesn't happen by accident. You don't just randomly have people just fucking being violent in a large group, you know?
Exactly.
And it's not, of course, it's not all protesters, but I mean, there are real protesters doing this kind of stuff. It's not just like, you know, there are real protesters mad and angry, but like, you're going to treat people like second-class citizens and treat them like shit, and you push people to the point where they don't trust anything that you do, and then you're like, oh, why don't you protest peacefully? They've done the protesting peacefully. It didn't do anything, and that's why they're fucking pissed off.
Yeah.
So it's like, listen to them. Maybe you want to listen.
Exactly.
Instead of being like, don't do this, don't be violent.
Exactly. Maybe listen to what people are saying and actually take some of that into consideration and start reflecting that in the policies and the changes that are made. And you're right. Again, we're not saying it has to be thought of. It has to be well thought of, right? Because we've already seen with this documentary, you know, abolishment of slavery. In a way, that concept of abolishing slavery was a good idea. You wanted to free these people, right? But at the same time, then it's not completely thought about, because then you don't think about the economic impact that had, that created all this other stuff. You don't think about how you need to now empower certain individuals that had previously been slaves to enter into the workforce and whatever else. And also, you need to be changing the mindset of the people that were, quote unquote, the masters to look at these people as equal citizens, as they should be. And by not taking those steps and just making a rash decision, it could be the same. Like, we're not saying that all of a sudden the states needs to be like, let people out of prison and whatever else. It needs to be like, steps need to be thought of consciously to be able to effectively come up with a solution. And I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, who knows, right? There's got to be but I feel like there's like steps that need to be taken and considerations, like wider considerations to be made, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I'm not a policymaker, but it starts with everyone understanding this whole situation, because if you don't understand it, then you're never going to make the right decisions. And another thing that I want to just quickly touch on, which was brought up in the Explained episode. So the Explained show on Netflix, the episode of the racial wealth gap. Yeah. And this basically highlights how crazy this wealth gap is. So this isn't about income. It's about like the median wealth among households. Okay. So this takes into consideration assets versus like liabilities, all that kind of stuff. So the median wealth among white households in America is $171,000. Among black households, it's $17,600.
That's insane.
Insanity.
Yeah.
Insanity. And that's because of many, many years of discriminatory practices that have, just kind of built up along those years, starting from slavery. Because like we discussed, the black people did all the fucking work because they were the slaves, and they were not properly incentivized. They were not given anything after the slavery was over. Exactly. So the white people that enslaved them just got to keep all the fucking wealth. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't redistributed. It wasn't redistributed. Because that's another thing. Why didn't they think of that when they were doing the whole abolishment of slavery and stuff?
Because they were still racist.
Exactly. But fundamentally, what should have happened is those people that had worked as slaves and made people multimillionaires or whatever at the time, there should have been a redistribution of wealth. But that's never going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. It's even now when we still have in sense like this large discrepancy of wealth, and it's never going to necessarily get redistributed. So it's crazy.
It's crazy. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel like, humanity needs to just fucking die out or something. We're fucking evil. We're fucking evil.
Oh God.
We should be ashamed of ourselves.
I know, but hopefully I'm hoping that there's a silver lining and something positive is coming out of all of this commotion and all this stuff that's happening, and something that makes real impact and change, but not, but in a thoughtful way. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like not a change that's just brash. That's just like, this is what we're going to do, but in a thoughtful and constructive way. So
exactly.
Hopefully
so
that's
yeah, guys, there you go. There's a breakdown of 13th, the documentary. You can find it on Netflix. You can find it on YouTube, the full documentary.
Yeah.
This is, I think, the best thing to watch if you want to start out by learning, what's going on in the States.
Yeah.
And then you can, do more research from there.
Exactly. 100%.
Anything,
it's really, really good.
Left to say, Daniel?
Not really. I just think, check out the documentary. It's awesome. Really, really insightful. And that's about it for me.
Stay safe though. If you are in the States, stay safe.
God.
If you are protesting, wear a mask. Let's try to at least. That's one concern.
Yeah. Remember, we're still living in
COVID.
Yeah. This is still,
believe it or not,
we're still, what is it called? The new norm, we're still living in what is the new norm?
Is that the term that people are using? New norm?
Well, no, I think I use that out of context, actually. The new norm is what's going to happen. Well, what's kind of happening in Spain right now, where it's like we're allowed to go shopping and do stuff, but we have to wear our masks. It's like our new norm. But yeah, just be mindful. Okay. The corona's out there. The COVID is out there. So let's be mindful of that.
There might be a spike, but just be careful. Try not to, hurt yourself. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in the next episode.
And feel free to give us a little comment below in the comment section. Yeah. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video or wherever
share this
you're listening to it.
If you find it interesting, share
and helpful.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks,
awesome.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.